The Dallas housing market is breaking all of the rules so far this winter. When prices usually go down, they've been going up. When the market's usually slow, it's been busy, and then suddenly it went right back to sleep. Now, you might think that smart buyers constantly monitor this and time their entry into the market, but actually the opposite is true. Smart buyers know when to call the market out as a liar or completely ignore it. Take fall home prices, for example. From October through the end of the year, prices went up. And we're talking quite a bit. And we're starting to hear all those, market cheerleaders saying prices have begun going up fast in Dallas and, you need to get in while you still can. So where is this coming from? Well, sure enough, we've seen an unusual trend in prices over the past few months. The Dallas market is usually super predictable, like year after year. Prices peak in June and then they bottom out in December and January. But that's not what happened this December. Instead of prices bottoming out, we saw prices going up. In fact, prices bottomed out in September and they've been going up ever since. Now that has resulted in a fair share of commentators heralding the strength of the Dallas market with the whole buy now message. You may see some videos about this, pressuring you to get into the market that prices, are only going to go higher. And I will say, I will definitely acknowledge this, that breaking the seasonal pattern like that is a pretty big deal. But smart buyers know if we have a pattern that has been around for decades, we need to ignore the FOMO and think it through. Now, I want to tell you this, anytime you see closed sales, all right, you have to think back by around 4 to 8 weeks to see what was happening then, right? Because real estate doesn't go under contract one day and then close the very next day. It's a process that takes time, and sometimes it starts with a buyer locking in their rate before they've even gone under contract. For us to really get a handle as to why prices are going up now, we have to look back a few months instead of looking at what's happening now. If you take a look at an interest rate chart beginning last summer, you can see that interest rates really bottomed out at the end of September. We saw a significant drop. During this time period, some buyers were able to lock in FHA rates in the 5s. You have to know this has a huge impact on what people are able and willing to pay for a home. For example, if you bought a home for $350,000 at 7.25%, the mortgage part of your monthly payment would be $23.87 a month. At the same price at 5.5%, which is what you could get with an FHA loan back in October, that same mortgage, you ready for this, would be $19.87 a month, saving you $400 a month. Now looking at it another way, all right, if a buyer was planning on spending $23.87 a month on their mortgage payment at 7.25% interest, they could afford a $350,000 house. At 5.5% interest, they could afford a $420,000 house. Think about how much that impacts buying power. We are talking about a loss of $70,000 in buying power. And why am I using these numbers as an example? Well, Mortgage News Daily reported earlier this week that the average top tier 30-year fixed rate was closer to 7.125% yesterday. That rate is now almost perfectly centered on the 7.25% level. So the buyer who could afford a $420,000 house in October, we're talking just 3 months ago, is back to being able to only afford a $350,000 house. So in just 3 months, that buying power has dropped by $70,000. This is volatility in interest rates. And as discouraging as it is, and I definitely realize it is discouraging, I'm telling you, it can be an opportunity. So why are prices higher heading into January when they always bottom out this time of year? Well, interest rate drops are always going to be linked to higher home prices a few months later. It makes sense that beginning when rates were at their lowest, a few months later, we would see prices going up. And looking back at that chart though, you really have to pay attention to the fact that rates have gone back up since then, right? I mean, we just read a quote about that. We're sitting right now at around 7.25%. So to the extent that that pocket of lower interest rates drove prices up, it makes sense that the higher rates we're seeing right now may very well bring prices down. Now, typically our seasonal pattern results in prices beginning to rise gradually in February until they reach their peak in June. Now, personally, I'm kind of expecting to see another trough, maybe just a little bit later this year. Like, I could be wrong, and I certainly don't have a crystal ball, but with rates as high as they've been, I think we may see a delayed bottoming out. It may end up that February is lower than January. In any event, okay, regardless, all right? If you hear hype about prices going up very quickly in the Dallas area, just put that into perspective with what interest rates were doing 4 to 8 weeks ago. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute because this is where we're going to get strategic. All right, this is where the opportunity is. All right, so here's the thing. Okay, you ready for this? Rate volatility prevents aggressive, consistent price change. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, we all saw what happened after 2020. When rates were super low over an extended period of time. All right, home prices went through the roof. In January of 2021, your median sales price was $283,000. Prices went up ridiculously fast. And by June of 2022, just 18 months later, the median sales price was $408,000. So in 18 months, the median sales price increased by over 44%. All right, that's not healthy. Okay, it's not good for the housing market. During that time, rates were stable, hovering at roughly 3%. So if we see mortgage rates drop over an extended period of time, that's what we can expect to see in the housing market. I mean, heck, that's what we saw the market start to do in October. When you see rates that are volatile though, that are going up and down, you don't see sustained aggressive price acceleration. But hear me when I say you do have opportunity, because if you can time your entry into the market during one of the dips, you can essentially buy in a buyer's market where you can negotiate aggressively and still get a lower interest rate. Now, I have heard a lot of commentators say you should not try to time the market, and I can kind of see where they're coming from, because getting ready to buy a home, it takes time. And especially with volatile interest rates, you may not be able to do it fast enough. That being said, all right, I think there is an argument to be made of being hyper vigilant with mortgage rates and being prepared and ready. We saw that those pocket drops do happen, so there is definitely opportunity here. Buyers who were ready to enter the market back in October are saving what, $400 a month right now? Tell you what, the smart buyer is going to know to respect the power of interest rates. Rates that are too low will rapidly raise prices. But if you can catch a pocket of low rates in a volatile market, that is a win, because you're scoring better prices and getting a lower interest rate at the same time. So this is what I suggest. Evaluate your personal situation first. Does your life situation allow for flexibility? If so, I would get prepared to take advantage of lower rates and then watch the market. Here's what I would do, okay? Go ahead and get pre-approved for a mortgage. Thoroughly educate yourself on what a rate lock is and what type of rate lock you would want to use when the time comes. Also, sign up for rate updates. Get your realtor all lined up. If you're local to the Dallas area, reach out to us through our Let's Find Home questionnaire. Hey, we'd love to help. Then get an automated home search set up and familiarize yourself with your area. The idea here is that you want to be ready when there is a pocket drop. This is called timing the market, and a lot of people recommend against it. And I agree, it can be tricky, but it does make for an excellent opportunity if it is right for you in your time frame. So for example, if you're on a month-to-month lease, or you'll be turning your current home into a rental. Any of the things that could allow you to liquidate your current living situation quickly without an extended process. If you're going to time the market, you need to have at least a working understanding of triggers that will bring change. You don't have to be an all-out student, but you do want to stay aware. Okay, so some variables that you kind of want to be paying attention to that are going to affect rates are the prices of the 10-year Treasury rate, policy changes with the new administration, the Federal Reserve's rate, of course, global events, housing demand and supply, inflation reports, recession, and the U.S. jobs report. Especially things like the CPI inflation report and jobs reports those things can change the market very quickly. But do keep in mind, you don't have to be necessarily an expert on any of these things. As rate drops are approaching, there will probably be videos all over YouTube announcing it. So basically, you need to be aware enough of the market to know when rates do go down and that it's probably going to be temporary, so you should be ready to jump in. Now, I realize this approach won't work for everyone. If you don't have that much flexibility and you're considering new construction, all right, I really recommend understanding interest rate incentives and especially the forward commitment. Now, what do I mean by forward commitment? Well, if you've been in the market at all, you've probably seen this. You just didn't know that's what you were seeing. In the world of new construction and high interest rates, okay, which is, like we all know, that's exactly where we are right now. Builders are forever offering rate incentives. All right, now this is what you need to know. Not all rate incentives are the same. And so smart buyers know the difference and know how to cut through the hype and target the best incentives. Your top incentive, all right, is going to be the forward commitment. It's less common, and like I said, you need to be looking for it. That being said, what you're most commonly going to see is builders offering money towards paying down your rate. Now, I'm not saying that this is a terrible thing, but when compared to the forward commitment, all right, this is what you need to know. Number one, there are rules limiting how much can be used. All right, number two, it's not as effective as the forward commitment. And three, sometimes it can be deceptive. So what do I mean by that? Well, many times in giant print, you'll see a $30,000 incentive towards your closing costs or a rate buy down. What you don't see in the fine print is that $30,000 is subject to lender contribution guidelines. Here's the thing, seller contributions are limited. With a conventional loan and less than a 10% down payment, the seller can only contribute up to 3% of the purchase price. With a 10 to 25% down payment, the seller can contribute up to 6% of the purchase price. Now, if a buyer has more than a 25% down payment, a seller can contribute up to 9% of the purchase price. If you're thinking about FHA loans, all right, with those, the seller can contribute up to 6% of the purchase price, and with a VA loan, the seller can contribute up to 4% of the purchase price. All right, I know, I can hear you saying, Wendy, please put that in English, okay? So here it is, in a very easy nutshell example. If a buyer is using an FHA loan to buy a home, the seller can only pay up to 6% towards the buyer's closing costs or a rate buy down. If a buyer is using a conventional loan, the seller can only pay up to 3% with a 5% down payment on the house. So let's just say you're buying a $400,000 house and you're putting 5% down with a conventional loan. In that scenario, the seller can only pay $12,000 of that incentive. So you got drawn in thinking you would get $30,000 in incentives, but they can't actually give you that. Now, the really unfortunate part of this is buyers sometimes go under contract before they fully realize they're not getting a $30,000 incentive. In the giant print, the builder made a promise they can't keep, but in the fine print, they do explain that they may not be able to. Now, this is why I'm such a fan of the forward commitment, and this is what the smart buyer needs to be looking for. With a forward commitment, the seller commits to a specific set or amount of properties long before a buyer enters the scene that on those properties, they will give, let's just say, a 4% interest rate. Now, a forward commitment is not going to change if you have a small down payment or even no down payment, because it isn't about you. It's a commitment the seller made to the property. Devin Bachman explains the forward commitment this way. She says, some builders purchase forward commitments which provide tranches of money at below market rates to originate mortgages for their buyers as an alternative to buying down the rate for the term of the mortgage. The keywords there are as an alternative. These new construction lenders are able to offer these low fixed rates without it coming from the 6% cap. So anytime you're looking at a bright, colorful advertisement, you want to look for the fine print. All right, does it say it's limited to seller contributions? If so, you need to be extra careful in how that contract is structured. D.R. Horton's going to tell you right up front, okay, this is what they say. Buyer understands that any unused seller contribution, allowance, and or credit towards closing costs will not, under any circumstances, be refunded to buyer, used as a credit, contribution, or allowance against the purchase price, or used to fund buyer's escrow account, if any, except as determined by seller in its sole discretion. Buyer further understands that all such unused seller contribution, allowance, and or credit will be forfeited. The Impressions Home contract puts it this way. Buyer and seller agree that additional closing cost incentive amounts are dependent on the structure of the loan buyer chooses, and any unused amounts that cannot be applied will be forfeited. With a forward commitment, there are no rules limiting how it is used. It's the most effective way to lower an interest rate, and it's not confusing or complicated. It's a flat out fixed rate. So these are my recommendations about forward commitments, all right? It's basically a no-brainer. If everything else works about the house, the location, the style of the house, and especially and most importantly, the market value, all right, to me, this is always your top choice. Because remember, if everyone can get a 4% interest rate on any house, okay, prices will go through the roof. But 7% interest rates are more or less holding prices steady. So a forward commitment is a way for you to get a home at a 4% rate without dealing with rapidly accelerating prices. Now, our buyers who need to sell first are in a uniquely vulnerable position. They will probably have to choose to ignore market opportunity. They can know all day long that they'll get a better deal with inventory homes, but it isn't an opportunity for them when it comes with an enormous amount of risk. Builders don't allow you to have a home sale contingency on their completed inventory homes. You cannot go into these kinds of sales assuming that your home will sell fast. Homes are on the market an average of 67 days right now. All right, because interest rates are really slowing things down. So you need to have a solid exit strategy if you have to sell your home first in order to buy a new one. Now, this is just my opinion, but I like new builds for my buyers who have to sell first. Like, you can take your time picking out your new home without having to worry about getting your current home on the market. You have this extended time frame for planning, and overall, it's just far less stressful. So here is a key consideration you need to have though, all right? Find out how long the home you're considering will take to build and plan strategically, okay? Time the market. You want to be listing your home for sale during these summer months. It can be really difficult if you go under contract with a new build and your current home needs to sell during the winter. All right, that means you have to sell your home when prices and demand are both low. So in this situation, being a smart buyer means you also have to be a smart seller. And by the way, these are the kinds of tactical things we guide each of our clients through. We always connect through a Google Meet first where we discuss your situation and then lay out a planned strategy for closing with as little stress as possible. Going along with all of this, of course, is pricing, making sure you're strategic, don't overpay, always planning ahead to get the best deal you can. But of course, that's a topic for a whole other video. If you're interested, you can watch it right here. In the meantime, Wendy out.